Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon. My name is Margaret Burr. I am the Director of Education at the Dubuque Museum of Art. Thank you so much for sharing this really special opening with us. I hope you find the exhibition as thought-provoking, as moving, and as memorable as I do. Thank you for being here. I'd like to thank the veterans for their service. Thank you very much. And I'd also like to thank the veterans' friends and families for their love and support of the veterans. So we appreciate it very much. I have a little bit of housekeeping before we start, so please bear with me. This program is supported by Humanities Iowa and the National Endowment for the Humanities. The views and opinions expressed by this program do not necessarily reflect those of Humanities Iowa or the National Endowment for the Humanities. Got that done, right? Okay, now the reason we're all here, it is my pleasure to introduce Mr. Ron Testa, our speaker for the afternoon. Ron and I have had an epistolary relationship for the last few months. It sounds very untoward, doesn't it? Actually, we've been exchanging emails, and he has been a thorough delight. So
they were totally innocent.
So I said to him, Ron, would you send me some stuff to when I give this introduction, because I think personal introductions are better. So he did send me some stuff, so they will commingle with the standard stuff. So you'll have to guess which is Ron's.
That's okay.
The commingle part? So anyway, here we go.
I don't commingle unless it's for profit.
Okay. Here we go. Ron hails from Youngstown, Ohio. He received a Bachelor of Fine Arts in Photography from the Cleveland Institute of Art in 1965. And a Master of Fine Arts in Photography from the State University of New York in Rochester in 1973. Since 1975, he has been the head photographer for the Field Museum in Chicago. As Ron says, he has been taking photographs for, quote, nigh over 60 years, and he has no intention of stopping.
Way over 9.
He has published several books that he describes as, quote, dealing with the humorous aspects of this crazy world. And now to better illustrate his intent, he sent me a fitting quote from filmmaker Tim Burton. One person's craziness is another person's reality. How true. So from 1966 to 1970, Ron was a combat photographer on the U.S. Navy ship USS Ticonderoga. As Ron commented, it was extremely dangerous, like working on a floating bomb. A selection of his photographs are upstairs in the McNamara Gallery. I hope you've had a chance to see them. This afternoon, he will speak in depth about those photographs and his experiences there in a talk entitled My Years at Sea. Take it away, Ron.
They told me to come up with a catchy name. Thank you for being here. I didn't realize I had so many people who wanted to hear about this. Well, first of all, I want to thank the Dubuque Museum. I have been involved with them for several years, and they have been nothing but professional and very accommodating, and we have a great relationship. And I want to thank the people that helped me put this together. David Schmitz, that's how you pronounce it? Stacy Peterson, Sarah Cullors, and Miss Margie Beholder?
Burr. It's called Burr.
I just know the Margie part. So I'm very thrilled and honored to be in such an impressive and somewhat intimidating show. I mean, my designation was a combat photographer, but nothing like these. These guys were. These guys were soldiers as well as photographers. I worked on an aircraft carrier that spent 4 years. Yeah, there we go. I took that. They spent 4 years on the ship and 3 cruises to Vietnam. This is the ship leaving San Diego, going to the South China Sea. And an aircraft carrier, it's called the Ticonderoga, USS Ticonderoga CVA-14. From now on, I will just call it Tyco. And an aircraft carrier, it combines of two units. There's the ship's unit, which is about 3,000 men, and they run the ship. And on our way to the South China Sea, the air wing flies in, and they land on the ship, and the planes are put up and ready for use. There are about 60 planes on the ship. You won't see half of them here because the other half are in the hangar deck. There's a hangar deck right underneath, and we have two elevators, one on the port side, middle of the ship, and one square deck in the middle of the prow. And that's how they get to the flight deck. And what else is there? And like she said, it is a floating bomb because we have enough armament to do in a small village without a problem. And we're always afraid of when there's a fire because if it gets anywhere near a magazine, you know, it's a lifeboat time. Next slide. These are ordinance people who are, what they're doing, they're inventorying and inspecting fuses that will be put into the 250-pound bombs. The fuses are very complicated. I looked online and tried to figure out how they work, and just a little bit too much math for me. But they can be regulated and timed to explode. They have altitude fuses. At a certain altitude, they can be programmed to explode, or they can be on impact. And they're inspecting. And the next slide, as the bombs are being run out on the flight deck, they're going towards the aircraft, and they're going to install the bombs on the aircraft. And they come up from the bomb lockers and they run them out. These are bomb runners. And next slide. That is two 250-pound bombs with fuses on a wing pylon, on an I think that's an F8. And there's one on each side. And then there's the A4s, which are smaller, the A4 Skyhawk, which are smaller aircraft, but they're the same. They carry four, sometimes 6 or 8 bombs, all ready for a strike. Next slide. This is 2 ordnance people putting on probably one of the most deadliest weapons on the ship. It's a Sidewinder heat-seeking missile, and this is being put on the side of an F8 Crusader. Just before the plane is launched, they pull off the cover, and that activates the heat-seeking possibilities. These are deadly because they come up behind the enemy plane, and they shoot it off, and it feeds off the exhaust of the planes, and you can't get rid of it. You can, but you ain't going to live long. So these are really incredible. They're still used today. Oh, I have a funny story about that. I'm telling my banker about this, and I show him the slides or the photographs, and I said, now this is a Sidewinder missile. He's a young guy. He says, oh, I know all about those. My combat program. I use them all the time. I started laughing. He said, shut up. Next slide, please. Now this is a pilot heading out for his ship, heading out for his aircraft. And you want to know the actual name for what he's wearing? Where is that damn thing? No, it's called a Poopy Suit. And you can actually go on Google and you can type in Poopy Suit, and you will find several manufacturers who still make these. And they're exactly what they say they are. They're made for pilots who have long time in the air and there's no co-pilot. And I have a cousin who flies, and he said they're real. And it's interesting that he's quite an old pilot, but he was good. Next slide. Now, on every launch, there's a helicopter in the air, not so much for reconnaissance, but for rescue. And this was taken right before I got on that to go up and just photograph the ship. That's mostly what I did on the hell. I've logged so many helicopter hours so that my head spins. So, and when I was up in the helicopters, I would take photographs for several reasons. Most of them for info shots of the ship and PR and stuff like that. A lot of them were taken for the intelligence people to help to put together and sort of lay out a script for a bombing run. And believe it or not, can you go to the last slide? These are the cameras I used.
Wow.
They're World War II vintage. This one takes a 9-inch black and white roll film. The smaller one takes a 5-inch black and white. Takes a 5-inch black and white roll film, and they're actually processed on the ship with photo processing machines. And then there are the usable negatives. There's just a lot that aren't. The usable negatives are taken down to photo intelligence, and they're the ones that lay out the bombing runs. They use gum Arabic. They didn't have Photoshop back then. They use gum Arabic, and they paste them all up, and they brief the pilots on what they'll be doing. And so I would go up on these quite often because they have a metal floor with a hook, a grip, something you put your clip in to hold it. My words don't come so easily anymore. But I had a gunner's belt around my waist, and I would snap the belt into the what word am I thinking of?
D-ring?
Hmm?
O-ring.
Well, it's a latch type thing in the floor, and I would hang out over the edge, put my feet on they're steps. Well, they're like a running board, only they're white and big. And I would use these cameras to take photographs, the photographs they needed. And I was young, careless, stupid. I was, every time I think about it, I don't think about it. And to this, and when I got out, I did a lot of aerial photographs for construction companies. But they're not as well maintained, believe it or not, as the Navy. And I flew in a lot of 175s where I could see the boats coming out of the doors. So I stopped flying altogether about 10, 12 years ago, not even commercial flights. I every time I fly, it's white knuckle airlines, so where was I? The helicopter. Now this guy, next slide, please. This guy, the flight deck, you can't hear anything because an active flight deck is about as loud as you can ever, because you've got 10 to 12 aircraft fully revved up with unbelievable noise. And you can't, everything is done by hand signals and color codes. The guys in white are safety officers. The guys in yellow are plane handlers. The guys in red are ordnance. The guys in green on our ship anyway, where we took care of the catapults and the resting gear. And nothing left the aircraft carrier unless his thumb was up. And that was, he would translate to the plane captains and then the flight deck captain, and he would do a thumbs up or a thumbs down. And my wife doesn't want me to do this one, but if the pilot isn't paying attention, one of my favorite hand gestures is, get your head out of your butt. And but we kind of colored it up a little bit. And the pilot would wake up and realize he was, reading Snoopy or something. But the next slide. Now, this is a port catapult shop. There were maybe, whatever the strike was needed. If they needed 15 planes, fine. If they needed 5, fine. But they were all put on steam catapults. And there's a man who ran them back there. And what a steam catapult is, the boiler room, well, first of all, the ship has to be going 35 knots into the wind. And it has to maintain that until all the aircraft are off the ship. The 35 knots and the headwinds help lift the plane out, because sometimes the cat is not up to full power. And what happens is the boiler rooms send steam to a pressure box, and then they hook up the aircraft and they activate the switch, and the steam carries it off, plus their own force. They're at full power. They're not at full power, but they don't go to full power unless they have to, and that's called an afterburner. And sometimes if they haven't got enough power, they kick in the afterburner, which throws a massive amount of fuel into the engine. And they go from 10,000 square feet pressure per inch to 16,000 in seconds. And many a time you see the plane come off the cat, and it's not quite powerful enough. And all of a sudden the afterburner kicks in and booms off. So it was very, this is me, probably. This is me right here. That was one of my jobs. I was a brown shirt. The brown shirt does everything everybody else doesn't do. And I was sent up quite frequently between the two cats. They're loading this one up for the second cat shop. I'm sorry, I refer to catapults as cats, so I figured you could handle it. And my job was I had a 16 millimeter camera, also from World War II. And sometimes we felt it was from World War I. It was just amazing. It was a camera you could drop from the top of the Washington Monument and you would not destroy it. So I'm there with 16 millimeter camera. I'm photographing every wheel that's attached to the catapult in case there's a problem. And if there's a problem, then that film is developed and it's sent to Washington for an investigation. We did have many catapult problems. The one main one we had is some plane person didn't get out of the way of the catapult, and then the aircraft dragged them halfway down the rail, and they didn't stop launching from the starboard cap, only from the port cap, until they cleaned it up. They had to bring him to sick bay, and he died in sick bay. And I was sent down with another photographer to photograph the accident for Navy Archives, because they're very concerned about especially deaths on aircraft carrier, because they're not really what they consider combat related, but they're also not non-combat related. They're fall in the middle somewhere. And I'm sitting there photographing him, and the other photographer mate's with me, and he has this big rubber patch on his side, about that thick, because it dragged him, and it was the rubber from the tire. And they had him on the gurney, and they turned him over, and all his insides fell on the floor. And the photographer with me, he kind of went back to the photo lab. But that stuff, for some reason, doesn't bother me. And I stayed and photographed it. And then from then on, I was the blood and guts photographer. Anytime there was anything involved with injuries, I was sent to do it because it never bothered me. Yeah, I would often wondered about that.
Did it happen very often that they did go in the ocean?
Pardon?
Did it happen very often that the plane did go in the ocean?
Once it did, but on the 4 years, on the 3 cruises I was there was very little accidents. There was very little. If you start shooting catch-offs one after another, eventually you're going to get a slow one. But they can compensate it with the afterburner. And we had one guy go off and down, and they usually end up in the screws. But that's the propellers off the fan tail. And but that only happened once.
You see, the challenge would be nighttime, flying in onto the aircraft carrier, flying in dark, coming into the aircraft, and landing. You don't have a lot of space, room there to land. Do you?
No, you don't.
Tell about that.
That's why modern aircraft carriers have an angle deck. They have a straight deck for catch shots, and then they have an angle deck this way. The Ticonderoga was in World War II, and it was a straight deck, open prow aircraft carrier. And when it was hit by 2 kamikazes in the Battle of the Philippines, they took it into port, fixed it up, put on an angle deck, made it a somewhat modern, at that time, carrier. Now it's all nuclear. And well, they're going back to steam powered, mainly because the biggest ship they made was the Nimitz at the time. And they found out that the ship never went exactly straight. The ship went like this, very slightly. And so they went back to steam. That's a rumor, and you never heard it from me. But I'll get to the recoveries in a minute. And so next slide. This is a very old aircraft. It was in World War II. It's an A-1 Skyraider. So it's the only propeller-driven fighter plane we had on the ship. And it's rumored it shot down the first MiG, but, you know, I don't know. Because it flies so slow, the MiG overshot it. He came up behind and shot him down. But that's not confirmed. He's carrying 4 rocket pods that are mainly used for anti-personnel. He hits the red button, and the rockets go right through the nose coverings and into the people who are in the way. And these were marvelous planes. And I'm glad that our ship was the last time they were used in combat. So they're just too slow, but they're mighty planes. Okay, now we get the recoveries. Okay, next slide. Oh, well, okay. We'll get the recoveries in a moment. The planes that dropped the bombs were F-8 Crusaders and, like I said before, A-4 Skyhawks. And each one had MOPICs, movie cameras, 16 millimeter movie cameras mounted in their wings. And they would follow a plane on a bombing run, and the other plane would take the moving photos of the bomb damage assessment, just to prove that it had, it's a verification. This is a photograph from I don't know if you're going to understand it, but it's a photograph from a 16 millimeter movie film. It's about, that's real small. And I happen to know the people, of course, that process this stuff. So I confiscated a couple. These are now been declassified. They're no longer confidential. They're declassified a long time ago. And I cleaned them up and I printed them because I thought they were a prime example of what we do over there, or what we did. The next slide. This is bomb damage that's been photographed, and they're all at the Navy Archives. Next. All right, this is not my photograph. It could be, but it's not, as I know of. This is just to set up the next slide. All Navy aircraft have tailhooks. And when a plane comes in for a recovery, layman terms, a landing, they would make sure that they caught one of the 4 arresting gears. And when the arresting gears got a tug on it, the arresting motors would start to back up and pull the plane in. And one of those snapped one time and cut the legs off of one of the arresting people. It's just amazing. And so that's a recovery, and that's how they do it. The next slide, this is a barrier landing. If you notice in the top, if you notice in the top picture, the left strut was blown off by a SAM missile, a Vietcong surface-to-air missile, and he couldn't make a proper recovery. So what they do is, he flies around and he's the last aircraft to be recovered because he's going to damage the deck. And so what they do is they erect a barrier, and then they're strips of nylon, they're about this thick, and they're all strips of nylon piled on top of one another, and they stretch it across the fantail, and they catch the plane. He's going about 600 miles an hour because that's his slowest. And then he just cuts the engine and he floats right in, and they pick up the wing, the red part, and that helps them grab air and whatever is in its way. Then they stop the aircraft. Then the recovery is over, and I was very fortunate to get this because one of my duties was photographing every landing, every recovery on the closed circuit TV and on the 07 level, that's 7 stories up. And I wasn't on the movie camera or the TV camera, but I heard he was coming in. So I went up with my camera and some Ektarcon at about 7 in the morning and photographed this. This is highly photoshopped because at 7 in the morning, there ain't much light. And, but I had to get it. And I've only witnessed one of these. And the next, please.
So is he killed, or does he eject from that before?
No.
He was
No,
killed?
he's no. Well, can I explain the ejection seats?
Yeah.
We had a pilot that missed all four resting gears, and somehow his wing hit the deck and damaged it. So when he went off the angle deck to come around again, he couldn't get altitude, but he panicked. And a pilot's cockpit chair, seat, whatever, is made for escape. They have a shield. They pull it down over their face, and it clamps. And then clamps come and hold their arms and ankles to the chair. And then a 5-inch shell is underneath the seat, and it's shot up, and he's completely clear of the aircraft. But the parachute doesn't open up at that low altitude. And when the parachute opens up, everything releases, and the airbags push him out of the chair. Well, that didn't happen because the parachutes didn't open up, and he lost it. So that's the explanation. I hope I'm right. I think I'm right. But that's the explanation of a ejection seat.
But did that pilot survive? Did that pilot survive in the one that was caught in the net?
No, that's not the one that was like it.
No, I know that the slide before, did that pilot survive?
Oh, this pilot survived. The other one with
Yeah,
the ejection
that guy.
seat didn't. Now, okay. Now, during the Tet Offensive, every once in a while we were required to fly strikes 24 hours a day, 24/7. And this is a recovery during night ops. And I kind of like this. Oh well. And they would land in full red light. It had to be red light because it's very hard to detect red light by the enemy. If it was a bright light, that would be a different story. But there were several of these. A lot of the times during the Tet Offensive, they would call for an alpha strike. And that means that every plane on the ship would be in the air and going towards targets. And what it did was it left the aircraft carrier completely defenseless. All they have is 2 5-inch guns and some pom-poms up front. And so they got back pretty quickly. So, next slide. And this is the end of the day of launching aircraft. They're sitting in the back, taking a smoke and chewing the fat. And had a lot of these. Next. This is a very strange photograph. Okay, I threw it in because I thought it was unique. The RF-8 Crusaders were photo birds. In other words, they had no armament, they had no guns, they had nothing except 5 cameras. 2 5-inch roll cameras on either side of the fuselage, and a nose camera in the nose of the aircraft. The nose camera was a 180-degree camera. It went from horizon to horizon. And I thought that was just a cat's meow. And so I had to have that negative. And that's from a copy negative, but it's one of my favorites too, because it's just a unique photo. I threw it in just for the heck of it. Next, please. And I'm so enamored by the World War II photograph in Times Square taken by Arthur Rothstein with the Navy man kissing there. I had to do something similar. And I think I succeeded. It's a very charming photograph. And this is homecoming on my last cruise. Yeah, none of my family came out. Everybody else's did. And all the cookies they sent me were moldy. And next is, this is the memorial in Washington. I've been there 3 times. This is, it's a very interesting photograph because I went back twice to duplicate it. I never could. I was just in the right time at the right place for once. So, and I could never duplicate that. And I've given this photograph to a lot of people, mostly veterans. And I don't sell my photos, I give them away. And well, you saw the ones with the cameras. That's the end of the exhibit. That's the end of the show. And I just wanted to make it clear that, my designation was a combat photographer, but I was never as precious as these guys on the show, because they were more than cameramen. And And that's just an incredible show. Very intimidating to photographers like me. But I would just trying to indicate that life on an active flight deck is extremely dangerous. I mean, there are backdrafts. Well, my first time on the ship, there was some problem on the flight deck, and they said, "Oh, just to handle this." And they threw me a speed graphic 4x5 camera. This was before digital. And so I run up on the flight deck. I put on my flight gear, which is a brown shirt and headphones and a skull cap and all that stuff. And so I go up, and all of a sudden I open the hatch to the flight deck, and there's a myriad of chaos. So I didn't even know where I was supposed to go to take the photograph. So I finally figured it out. Some guy just... So I'm running over there, and all of a sudden I get caught by a backdraft. And if you look at the photograph in the show of the tipping the helicopter, you see the catch nets along? There's catch nets all along the ship, just for idiots like me. Well, it blew me into a catch net, and the camera went like this under the rail, and I was left with the handle. So I couldn't do the job, so I was in a kind of a daze, and one of the flight deck people escorted me to the hatch, and I went back down to the flight deck, and I sat down, and I said, and they all but laughed at me. They said, "Oh my God, you're going to have to pay for that camera." I said, "Oh, what? What do you mean pay for the camera?" And then the photo officer came out and said, "He's not going to have to pay for the camera. It was equipment failure. He came back with the strap. He didn't throw it overboard." So that was my initiation to the flight deck, and I was never more careful after that.
So is the backdraft from the jets? What's the backdraft from? Is it the
Oh,
jets?
I don't know what to call that. I'm at a loss for words sometimes. You know, when the jet engine shoots out the back,
Right.
it's the backdraft.
Okay.
I know you think it's a fire thing, but it's I call it
It's just the vacuum or something from that?
right.
Okay. Interesting.
I take questions, but I'm very bad.
Was that photo taken at sunset or sunrise?
Oh, sunset.
Sunrise.
Pardon?
I'm trying to figure out where you were.
Yeah, and it's not a color photograph. Somehow, when I put it in the Photoshop, the colors came out. And I said, "What the hell? I'm going to leave it that way." So it's a black and white photograph that was accidentally manipulated by Photoshop. And I love every inch of it. And we had a lot of guys. It was very hot there. We had extremely hot. And we had a lot of guys who slept on, the bunk areas were extremely, extremely humid and hot. And there was 35 people in a place about 1/4 the size of this, stacked 4 high on bunks. And a lot of the guys slept on the deck, on the side decks, and a couple of them actually rolled off. So we were told not to do that. I have no idea why. But it's very dangerous on this ship. Like I said, it's like a floating bomb. And I don't know if this is classified or not, but I really don't care. I'm 80. Come and get me. Uh-oh, I don't want questions from you. She was on the Hancock prior to when I was there, and the same thing.
I just want to add something to what you just said. Very hot. Let's listen up the electrician. No air conditioning in our compartment where I slept.
They hadn't invented it yet.
Air conditioning. So, yes, it was hot. So, one of our water tenders was on the mid-watch, well before.
I hated those.
So he went out on this, what they call the sconces, which the deck, number one deck, O1 deck, or the first deck, main deck. He went on the sconces to sleep. So he told the guy, when it's time to wake me up for my watch, I'll be out there. So they went out there to find him. There was his pillow and blanket, and he was gone.
He was gone, yeah.
He rolled off.
Oh.
So the word went out to the other destroyers that were with us, that a man overboard. So after searching for this gentleman, everybody was on the lookout. Lo and behold, the next day, they found him in the water, treading water.
Really?
The destroyer went and picked him up, and then one of our helicopters went over to the destroyer to get him, brought him back to the ship, and I was aboard that day. We were not flying, so the helicopter landed. I had my camera, and I took a picture of him. He had his t-shirt on and his dungarees.
Yeah.
No shoes or socks.
Yeah.
And the salt water had shrunk up his dungarees that he couldn't close his pants in front so they were wide open. And he had skivvies on.
Well, did you go to the boot camp, swim under fire?
No.
Were you? I can't swim. I still can't. I don't want to either. But you were standing on the edge of the pool, and they had a strip of gasoline in the middle of the pool, and they lit it on fire. You were supposed to take your pants off. That's why you wear.
Bottoms.
Bell bottoms. Take your pants off. Tie the legs in a knot. Pull up the fly. Put it behind your neck, and fill it with air, and then clasp it, and then float underneath the fire just to get in the Navy.
Yeah. So he kept his pants on. Anyway,
So it was.
he was lying well, walked up, and
I know that happened a lot.
it happened one time.
Were you at? Did you go to Lake Bluff?
No.
You went to San Diego?
San Diego.
Oh,
And another thing which was saying also, that flight deck at nighttime was, everybody had their job with whatever color shirt you had on. And you just stayed out of the other one's wake. And they were moving planes. If I had a breakdown with an electrical problem up there, I had to take care of it. They didn't tell you we're coming along here. The jets just came, they kept on flying, and yeah, it was dangerous.
yeah. They never stopped, no matter what happened.
No.
They just got rid of the problem and kept on.
And our jets always hit the afterburners before they took off. So we never did lose a plane launching.
No, I never saw an afterburner.
No, they hit them off, and oh yeah.
Yeah,
Big ball of fire.
well, if we did an afterburner before the cat shop, that fire went right straight down into the Admiral's cabin.
How old were you when you did this?
How old what?
How old were you when you started this?
Well, I came into the service with a bachelor's degree, and the draft caught me before I could get into a graduate program. I was 23 when born in 62, went in 66. 6 over the 2. I was 24. And I had a hell of a time at Liberty on the government's nickel. I enjoyed Liberty like any other sailor would. And most of the stories I can't tell my family.
How many destroyers did they have to protect the carrier?
I didn't hear that, sir. I'm sorry.
How many destroyers were part of that fleet?
I never counted them, but there were at least 6, and we were involved with the USS Pueblo. Remember that? It was berthed next to us in San Diego when we went in, and I was it was after my second cruise, and I was dying to get off the ship and do something else. So I heard they had a photographer on the Pueblo. So I went over there and I said, "Hey, you want to switch jobs?" And he said, "Yeah, why not?" So we put in chits. You know what a chit is. It's a piece of paper that says, I want to do this and that and this. And they denied it, thank God. But the Missouri came out of mothballs, went over to the Sea of Japan, and the entire task force followed the Missouri up to Korea, and we were going to blow them off the map if they didn't give those guys back. It was the biggest task force ever formed since World War II. And I got a special medal made just for that catapult. I haven't claimed it yet. But, and then we went up when they shot down the PT too. But it was strange because the Missouri came out of mothballs just for that. And then after that, it went right back into mothballs again. And you know the Missouri, that's where they signed the treaty with Japan. So that was, I learned a lot in the Navy. I didn't think I would because, you know, I was a smart ass. I graduated with a BFA in photography. I thought I knew everything. No way. I did things in the Navy in photography that I didn't even know existed before I went in. And it was a great experience. One of the best experiences was that it had helped me get along with several different types of people. I mean, during the Tet Offensive, I was working side by side with a guy who had the choice of either jail or military service. Several of them. That's how they got a lot of people for the Tet Offensive. And it was quite an experience that I didn't realize how great it was until about 5-10 years afterwards. And that and my experience at the Field Museum, I will say that I call on it almost every day. And it turned out to be a wonderful experience. And I'm sorry, deadly sorry, that so many people had to die for what some people consider nothing. They had no choice. And so, I think I'm done.